Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah and barakah. I am Elar Madami. I tell you that like every god also has a history. God is a king who, over time, decided to go through so many stages. At that time, the king of God was one and the same among the civilization and people. Gradually, this concept was replaced by the worship of multiple gods. In Iraq, for example, the concept of one god was dominant. Then, the concept of many gods emerged and a new civilization was established. This new civilization was centered on the worship of gods. In the future, the Creator will bless these gods. The ancient Jews had the concept of one god, which later transformed into many national gods. The same is true of the history of the Christian God, which is found in the form of Nuriyat Asli, in which the God's existence is divided into three parts. Most experts agree that the concept of God and Goddess was represented in pictures and monuments. They also believe that Al-Wahid was compared to dead or non-existent humans. Similar methods were invented for worshipping him, such as ringing bells and drums, whistling and clapping in front of gods and saints, bringing wicks and candles, pleasing God with incense and butter, etc. Islam promoted all of these concepts and established the belief in a singular God, free from all attributes, wonders, and wealth. This eternal God is in constant communication with his servants, and he is the only one. Sleep and death are not possible for him. Everything is within his nature. He is the master of profit and loss, the owner of the sky and the minds of fish, and the master of life and death. Everyone must submit to his authority. Expert Nafsiyat segment Fried has written that every person who believes in the creation of God is definitely a victim of such a mental image that it becomes the bias of non-rationality. Philosophers do not have only the history of God. Sufis believe in one God. Join us to explore the historical perspectives on God across different philosophical traditions. Watch the video in full. At the beginning, 9 people created a God who is the greatest of all the gods and the ruler of the people. He had no god, idol, or any holy symbol. Gradually, he became so distant from humans that they deemed him useless. He was reduced to a mere river. 4,000 years before Christianity, there were people in what is now Iraq who were known as Syria. They established the first religion of the world. The Sami people celebrated Katmaki in their city, built idols in minarets, and gave an influenced Shariat. They also exhibited unparalleled manners and etiquette. However, they were soon attacked by the Sami tribe, who adopted their language and culture. In the 2000s, the Assyrian people conquered the Sumerian city-state of Babylon. 500 years later, the Ashurites established a settlement near Ashur and conquered Babylon in the 8th century. Another history of Babylon emerged, influencing religion. Like the ancient people, the residents of Babylon attributed their success and prosperity to the gods. Babylon was considered a reflection of the heavenly world, and all its temples were copies of heavenly palaces. The festival celebrating the heavenly world was the New Year. This tradition continued uninterrupted until the 7th century AD. During this period, the king was also worshipped, and the following year was determined. A sheep was sacrificed to establish the political year of independence. The old king was disgraced and the new king was enthroned. These ceremonies were of the status of actions and made the people of Babylon eligible to take a bath in the sacred Wat Yama. The people of Babylon were responsible for their civilization. The river killer was a sentient being susceptible to forces of disarray. It was a ritualistic tale that on the 4th day of their festival, Prahat and Mana recited Enuma Elish together. This tale demonstrates the triumph of the gods over chaos. A closer look at Enuma Elish reveals the depth of spirituality in this ancient worldview. Centuries later, our Creator was named, marking a significant moment in our spiritual history. The Quran and Bible offer different descriptions of this history, but the story existed in some form or another. It emerged much later and was incorporated into the history of God. The beginning of the story is the story of the gods themselves. It has acquired a lot of importance in Jewish and Muslim philosophy. Enuma Elish states that at the beginning the gods emerged in pairs from a vast ocean. The idea of Adam coming to the world did not exist at all. It was a new thing for the ancient world. The world of Eloah was already present. The story of the gods' beginnings is a key part of Jewish and Muslim philosophy. In Enuma Elish, it is stated that the gods first appeared as pairs in a vast ocean. The concept of Adam coming to the world was entirely new to the ancient world. The entire world of Eloah was already present. When the residents of Babylon tried to imagine the beginning of the ocean, they went to the swampy wilderness of Mesopotamia. This will always be the case. After that, three gods emerged: Epsom, the freshwater god; Doom, the salty sea; and the god of fire. The names of these three gods appeared in the womb of Mamluk. They can be translated as historical Adam and Eve. Their individual identities were not established until other gods in different forms were mentioned, which is crucial in the history of our God. The official gained more importance. Each new deity was identified with. The troubles had just begun and it had become disorganized. The forces of waiting could be controlled only by two limits: Vandevta of his parents. He stood up against Arya but was not able to gain control over his wife, Kaamate. Luckily, he had a son, the god Marduk, who is the most perfect example of the same race. In the Supreme League of Gods, Marduk promised to fight with Kaamate on the condition that he be made his ruler. After a fierce battle, Marduk emerged victorious, defeating Kaamate. This is the end of the story so far. The final Marduk decided to create a new world by standing over the corpse of Kaamate. He divided Kaamate's corpse into two parts and used them to create the Arch of the Sky and the humans. He then created the world of humans. To elevate Hari to an independent position, a system had to be established. The conquest was unfinished and had to be established anew each year. All the gods came to the mark of the new world, i.e., Babylon, and built a temple. This temple, a 7-story tower from Marduk, symbolized the infinite sky. When it was finished, Marduk sat on its summit, and the gods surrounding him proclaimed, "This is Babylon, the favored city of the gods, your chosen are bowed." After this, they made efforts and plans for the universe. This story is the introduction to civilization in man by the people of Babylon. They recognized that their ancestors had constructed the Tower of Babylon, yet the story of Enuma Elisha also highlights their conviction that their technological achievements were accomplished independently. The story clearly demonstrates that the project was never finished. He regarded Babylon as a sacred place, the center of the world and the abode of the gods. This idea is found in almost all the ancient scriptures. Ultimately, Marduk proved his worth in humanity. By killing Gang, he eradicated blood and dust. The first human was created by combining God's wonder and looking at it from a perspective. One point is worth noting in this story. Man was created from the matter of the gods and was a part of the Elohit's nature. There was no gap between humans and gods, even if it was on a limited scale. In the natural world, men and women and the gods themselves had the same nature and they all had the same creation. Elohit was not fundamentally different from humanity, so Shariat was unnecessary. The only difference was that the gods were not more powerful and fierce. This concept wasn't exclusive to the Eastern world, it permeated the ancient world. The stories of Marduk and Doomsday are prime examples. The Canaanites also embraced this belief, weaving similar tales about Baal into their own traditions. Baal was a god of thunder and storms, and the Bible mentions him as well. The ocean does not come into the ocean. The story of the battle between the river god Yam and Nahal is found on clay tablets prepared in the 4th century AD. Both lived with the Canaanite god, Aral-Arel. In the Battle of One, Yam demands that Baal be handed over to him. Baal defeats Yam with the help of 2 magical weapons and he's about to kill him when Ashi, El's wife and the mother of the gods, pleads that killing the prisoner is a disgrace. Baal, recognizing Yam's humility, acquiesces and sends him to assist. Yam is associated with the smooth seas and rivers, which are always at risk of causing floods and Pisces. Baal, the god of storms and clouds, protects Pisces. In many ancient religions, space has been described differently. We also use inspiration or alpha for some space, but the end of space was the opposite. He died and the god of death became the protector of monkeys. Allah descends into the world. Upon hearing the news of his son's death, he descends from his throne, wearing sackcloth but with his. Unable to get his son back, Baal's lover and orphan sister go out in the same kingdom in search for her twin soul. When she finds his dead body, she arranges a very extreme ritual by conquering death. I would kill him and bring his corpse into ashes. She sows mango in the field. Sister Anastasia is found, who gives a new life to the soil by searching for some dead god. The book of Genesis states that there were 3 waves of Hebrew population in Canaan, i.e. did Israel. They were related to Abraham and Haran. This wave arrived around 1850 AD, marking the month of Christ. The second wave of immigration is associated with Jacob, Abraham's grandson, who was given the name Israel. The Bible tells us that Jacob's sons migrated with the 12 Israelite tribesmen to Egypt when they were told to do so. The third wave of Hebrew immigration arose around 1200 BC, when many claimed to be descendants of Abraham. The tribal people had enslaved them, but a god named Jehovah freed them from this bondage. Jehovah was the god of their leader, Moses. During their return to Canaan, the Israelites joined forces with the Bani Israel. The Bible states that the ancient Israelite Muta was the source of the gurus and that the basis of their unity was faith in Yahweh. However, it should be noted that the biblical version was written several centuries later, during the 19th century. The prophet Muhammad, the great prophet of the Bible, gave a unique method to the first 5 books of the Bible, which include birth, qada, numbering, and tasna. 4 different books were separated in it. We now call them the Qamsah. In 742, during the time of Christ, a member of the royal family of Judah saw Yahweh in a dream in the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. This was a significant problem for the children of Israel. King Ur of Judah died that year, and his son Ahab ascended the throne. He encouraged his family to worship pagan gods along with the youth. The northern kingdom of Israel fell victim to the Tawafil Malki. After the death of King Jeremiah in 736, the 5th king of the northern kingdom, the Assyrian king, Nigel-Placer himself, was extending his hand towards their fish. 10 northern Israelite tribes were forced to disappear from history, but only a small number of martyrs remained. The kingdom faced a threat to its survival. After the death of the king, Yazaghulib, the devotee of Mother, was worried about the coming trouble. He also discussed the problem of Mother's death. He was overcome with a sense of profound loneliness. He was a pillar of the ruling class, but his thoughts were in the public and the mosque. The fragrance of frankincense spread in Mecca, and the blood of the sacrificed animals was scattered everywhere. He was certain that the Lord of Israel had been deprived of his inner freedom and right air. He felt that this air itself was filled with love for the Lord, the light of its air in the sky above the Lord. Hindus never presented the Brahman as a great king because it is not possible to describe their god with such human characteristics. This story should not be taken literally. This is an attempt to describe the indescribable. In Hinduism, the youth is often depicted as a king in the sky, sitting with the Lord. Baal, Marduk, and other neighboring gods have been described as rulers of some kind of deity to a large extent. However, under the influence of the Quran, Asad had started to become dominant in Israel. The word of God, the word of man, and God is still unimaginable for the untouchables. Eve asked, "Whom shall I send to you who will be my prophet?" He replied to Moses, "I am here." He threw that veil on me, which meant that the prophet had to be given a practical task. In essence, a prophet is someone who aligns with the God of this world. The message was never easy. Moses conveyed to Moses that the people would not accept this message. If they reject it, don't let it shake your resolve. You have heard it again and again, but you still don't understand. You have seen it again and again, but did not understand. 700 years later, Hazrat Isa al-Salam came to power. The people refused to listen to his message. No man can understand reality. The Israelites were on the brink of annihilation. Yahweh did not have a happy message for them. Their cities would be destroyed, their fields would be deserted, and their homes would be uninhabited. Jesus witnessed the destruction of the Northern Sultanate and the suffering of the 10 tribes during his lifetime. In 701, Saqqi-Rab, with a massive Ashur army, attacked Judah, its 40 cities, and its forts. He skinned the Maccans and killed about 2,000 people. The Jewish king was imprisoned in Jerusalem. Jesus did a great job of warning his people about the terrible destruction that was to happen. The God of Moses brought good news, while the God of Jesus was angry. The prophets took responsibility for themselves, and all the signs of that era became honor. The common imagination of the prophets was here. Believers were grateful towards Jesus, but lived in the Nubian kingdom. They took the support of Israel in the north and went to the ancient pilgrimage place of Bethel. There he talked about the doomsday and cancelled the Resumat. The head of the Kanka suddenly thought of amusement as one of those hidden spirits who used to roam around in groups and predict the fate. The priest demanded that amusement take him away from there. Amusement replied contemptuously, "I am not any hidden spirit, but the one who shows the right path from the path of Judah. I am not a prophet, nor do I belong to any tribe of prophets. I was a shepherd, but Judah chose me and said, 'Go and tell my message to Bani Israel.'" The people of Bethel did not want to listen to the message of the youth. Amos also had another messenger for them. His wives were forcibly brought out to the streets, and their children were punished. He would be married and die in exile, far from the land of Israel. Amos thought of Jehovah, a member of the royal family, as a king. Amos transferred his sympathy for the cameras to Jehovah. Bausi still saw Jehovah as a deceitful husband. He was in love with his unfaithful wife. The deaf soul could not start the creation. This presentation of God through human beings gave rise to a new concept not present in Hinduism. Among the 3 types of God, there is a common group of people like James and Jesus. The Jews were the first to establish a single name. They adhered to the Shekinah and Tasli. After Jesus Christ's death, his followers wondered, did he assume the status of Al-Wahin? This transformation did not occur immediately. The Christian belief emerged over time, evolving into a process of intoxication. Christ himself never claimed to be God. At the time of his baptism, a prophet called him the Son of God. This was simply a confirmation that he was the beloved Christ. That personality was no ordinary thing. The Bible tells us that God had bestowed upon Jesus the special status of Al-Wahin, making him capable of doing godlike works even in this bad condition, for example, treating the sick. People saw the great Jesus in this state and he who forgives sins, and they saw a divine picture of God. On one occasion, 3 of his disciples claimed that they had seen Jesus in a more than usual manner. This story was preserved in the works of the 3 first Christians Matthew, Mark, and Luke and became a common belief among future generations of Christians. It tells us that Jesus took Peter, James, and John to a high mountain. According to the scriptures, it was Mount Everest in Galilee. There, Jesus revealed himself to them as God, his face like the sun, and his clothes filled with light. Matthew also mentions that Moses and Elijah, the representatives of the Sharia and the prophets, appeared to him, and all 3 engaged in conversation. They brought a letter, and when they came, he said that they should take 3 disciples in remembrance of this heavenly event. A canopy should be made. A dark cloud covering my chest. A voice was heard saying, "This is my son. I have special mercy on him. Listen to him." Centuries later, the Greek Christians through this holy book. She considered the mother and concluded that the mother of Jesus Christ had become human by God's will. She also noted that Jesus never claimed to be the master of these things. Jesus repeatedly promised his disciples that if they had faith, they too should accept him as their mother. The Akika Dirist was meant for a certain generation. They thought all the noble people would be its owners. He was capable. If his disciples had full faith, they would have been capable of creating great things, and they would have been capable of lifting a mountain and throwing it into the ocean. They knew that because their measured and water life, the power of God had changed the world and the Messiah's kingdom was prevalent in the world. After his death, the disciples and the believers could not argue that Christ was for some or the other person. He was a devotee of God and had started worshipping him at a very early age. Hartalpa was confident that God's power would make the whole community. He preached in the area which now includes Turkey, Macedonia, and Greece. He firmly believed that non-Jewish people could become members of the New Israel even if they did not fully adhere to the Muhammad Sharia. This exposed the true nature of the disciples, who remained mainly a Jewish sect but were actually Egyptians. He established a strong resistance to the Jews. After Gidpal was left alone, most of the people who believe in the hand are Jews or believe in God. The New Israel was deeply Jewish. They never called Jesus God. They called him the Son of God in the Jewish sense, as they certainly did not believe that Jesus was an incarnation of God. He was the power and spirit of God. Hamid believed that Christ was an incarnation of God. Akhirist has been the pride of its status. At almost the same time, various types of crimes were rampant in India. When we take this vow, we shall be filled with the love of Jesus. Buddha can be seen caring for his beloved wife in the forest. In both Islam and Hinduism, there existed a matter of great fondness for great personalities. For example, Mahatma Buddha himself and the Hindu gods who came in human form. This profound devotion was named Bhakti, which expresses human passion for the human form of God. This marked a radical new beginning, yet it was incorporated into the religion without compromising the fundamental principles of either body. In 320 AD, a prominent religious group gained power over Egypt, Syria, and Asia Minor. Gods and travelers recited popular songs that declared the Father as the sole, true, and unparalleled God, while the Son was neither his partner in heaven nor an uncreated being. The Son received life from the Father and death from him. Christians knew that Jesus Christ gave them life and death from him. The division was made by 9, and they are now indestructible in this world. People often misunderstand Nuriyat, imagining the three al-Wahabi personalities. It is clear that Sufism has created many similar concepts in both Judaism and Islam. One example is the concept of God becoming flesh, which is central to both Kabbalah and Sufism. Ultimately, the Father relinquishes all his responsibilities to the Son. Once the Father relinquishes his responsibilities, he becomes silent. We have no words for this, for we know only one God. He is the Logos, or the Son. The Father has an eternal form and keeps us in tune with our personality. The oneness of existence is the ultimate truth, a concept that resonates with the philosophies of Denis, Plotinus the Elder, and the Buddha. The Father is a central figure in Christian theology, and the Christian view is that he is the one, and Hindus and Buddhists had to create a place for devotion in the form of a person, but the sign of Daisli shows that it is natural to get salvation through personality worship in that God. Just imagining the truth is not enough. It makes one capable of believing in God. The Christians adopted a special view of God by making Christ an incarnation. Christians were the first and the last prophet of the human race, and the arrival of any Messiah in the future was made impossible. Consequently, when a prophet emerged in Arabia in the 7th century, the Christians faced disgrace similar to that experienced by the Jews. Islam emerged as a unifying force, taking hold across the Middle East and North Africa. In 610 AD, after the war, a man from the glorious city of Mecca received a turban that was very different from the turban of the others. Muhammad ibn Abdullah used to take his family with him every year and go outside the city to pray in the Gur Haram during the month of Muharram. This was a common practice among the Arabs of the region. Muhammad, also known as Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, was regarded as the god of the Arabs. He devoted himself to worship and giving alms to the poor who visited him during that time. However, he also spent time thinking and worrying. His memoirs reveal that, despite the recent success of Mecca, he was deeply concerned about the wealth of Mecca. He deliberately avoided it. He was strict about staying awake every day and made a concerted effort in the last part of the 13th century. Over the years, they achieved great success in trade, and Mecca became the most important settlement in Arabia. They had never dreamed of such wealth and prosperity, yet this change in life meant that they had become a learned capitalist. The nation had taken on the form of old, tribal values. The people felt powerless and heartless. Muhammad, peace be upon him, recognized the Quraysh's precarious course and knew they needed a new idea to improve their situation. At this point, a political solution could only be of religious nature. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam understood that the Quraysh were profiting from this. This was not surprising, as they must have felt their new wealth had liberated them from the hardships of a nomadic way of life. They had plenty of food and were making Mecca the center of pilgrimage in the Middle East. Some were even certain that their wealth would guarantee their prosperity. However, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was certain that his vision would transform the tribe. In the old days, the tribe was a dominant and individual people. Its members knew that their future was dependent on one another. They considered it their duty to take care of their masters, brothers, and relatives. But now, these nomads had strayed from this brotherhood, and fighting had become the norm. In their pursuit of wealth, the people forgot the Quraysh. Each section of the tribe competed for its share of Mecca's wealth, including the less fortunate families of Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Banu Hashim family, in particular, found security in their lives. Hazrat Muhammad was convinced that the people of Arabia would remain at risk of conflict as long as they did not limit their lives to a high level and control their jealousy and pride. The situation in the rest of Arabia was also the same. For centuries, the people of Arabia were killing each other. To establish brotherhood among the people, the Arabs created the concept of murra, which fulfilled many of the purposes of love. According to tradition, the Arabs had very little time for love. They had idols in both religions, but the memory of this had not yet come to the fore, disrupting the relationship between those gods in the sacred place with the spiritual life. They had no concept of life, cloud, and death. It was not an imagination but fate or destiny. Mutlaq we practice manliness, but its meaning is much broader. It means patience and pain and suffering in the battlefield. Kamishwara used to divide the population on a large scale and kill the murderer of any member of his tribe. This clearly demonstrates the principle of brotherhood. Individuals could disappear completely before Islam in Arab countries. There was no authority to kill the murderer himself. In such cases, any member of the enemy tribe could be killed. The chieftain was the only authority figure who could ensure overall protection in the area. If a chieftain failed to act, his tribe would continue to be respected, and others would kill his members without hesitation. This was a form of instant justice, ensuring that no tribe could easily dominate another. This also meant that after different tribes, the second one used to take revenge. Murra had many important aspects. He promoted both women and men, but showed carelessness towards women and animals. He spread and promoted charity and taught the Arabs not to worry about the future. This quality made him immensely important in Islam and was the source of Arabs' religious fervor for many centuries. While it met a crucial need, it could not align with the circumstances of the 18th century AD. In the final days of the Islamic era, there was widespread insecurity and spiritual unrest. At that time, the tribes were busy in groups and got help from their relatives. Forgiving the opinion and the people of Muta Arabs, it became impossible for them to become a separate civilization. They were unable to form a separate civilization. The big powers used them continuously to keep the West Arabian Peninsula and the Persian Gulf region. As a result, Yemen was reduced to a province of Persia. At the same time, invaders from outside, including Africa and Islamists, began to invade the region. The old tribal traditions were hollowed out, and the issue of life after death was Christian. Akhtaris gave them tremendous power, and within 100 years they established their powerful empire, which extended from Hamadan to the Arabs. The Arabs were happy with this fact until Bay'orn. They believed that Allah had never sent any prophet of his own to them, although the Baytullah had existed among them since ancient times. In the 7th century, many Arabs believed that the Kaaba was actually the house of Allah. While there was a great deal of respect for it, all the people of the Arab world believed that the Kaaba was the house of Allah. Mecca was the most sacred place in Arabia. Every year, all the residents of Arabia came to worship and stay for many days. Despite the unique status accorded to the Hajjawir musicians of the Baytullah, they never held the same status as prophets such as Abraham, Moses, or Jesus. Moreover, the Arabs lacked any heavenly scriptures in their language. They felt a deep sense of spiritual inferiority towards those who had their dealings with Jews or Christians. They taunted them as barbarians who had no peace from the way of God. The Arabs had a deep sense of respect as well as envy for them. He also felt that there were things he did not know about. The Arabs knew that Judaism and Christianity had some advantage in this field, yet they acknowledged that this progressive form of religion was better than their own traditional idolatry. Some Jews lived in Medina, and some northern tribes living on the border between Persia and the Banu Sultanate had accepted Christianity. However, they were accustomed to the Buddhist tradition and were not related to any of them like their Yemeni brethren. They were also not influenced by the Sultanate. They were keenly aware that both the Persians and the Banu Muslims had exploited Christianity and Jewish expertise to subjugate their tribes in the war. As they suffered greatly and their tradition was wiped out, it's clear that some Arabs sought to find a unified way of life independent of the Sultanate's influence. As early as the 5th century, the Christian Muhammad of Palestine, Murray stated that some Arabs in Syria had rediscovered the true meaning of Ibrahim, which was from the period before the revelation of the Torah and the Bible. This indicates that Muhammad was neither a Jew nor a Christian. The first teacher of Sirat Nabu tells us that long before the birth of Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the Meccan Quraysh had decided to adopt the original Din Hanifa of Hazrat Ibrahim. Initially, 3 Hanifs held significant prominence among the Muslim community. The followers of Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam were Abdullah bin Hazrat Barqa bin Auf and Sa'id bin Amr and Amr ibn Khatm. According to a tradition, Sa'id traveled to Shem and Iraq in search of Din Ibrahim. One of them, Sa'id, addressed the Quraysh who were leaning against the Kaaba and performing tawaf. He declared that none of them were true followers of Ibrahim's religion except him. He sighed and said, "O Allah, if I knew how you want your worship to be done, I would have done it accordingly, but I do not know the method." For that, its wish was fulfilled on 27th Ramadan 610 AD in Qahira by Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Hazrat Jibreel brought the Wahi from the knowledge of Allah to him. He later recounted an angelic visitation where the angel commanded him to read. He replied, "I cannot read." "You are not a carrier. You used to claim to read al-Wahi Shifat, but Jibreel brought you along with him." Bhina said, "Iqra, you also gave the same reply." Finally, after drinking it for the 3rd time, a new heavenly verse was revealed from your lips. "Recite the name of your Lord, who created all creatures and man from a lump of blood." Keep reciting it aloud because your Lord is very generous. The Lord who taught knowledge through the pen taught man that which he did not know earlier. God spoke for the first time in Arabic. That writing was named the Quran. Hazrat Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him, returned home with trepidation, fearing he might be mistaken for a stranger and lose his belongings. What did the king do when he saw the earth? "I used to think about your authority. You always made someone happy." That's nonsense. He used to talk all kinds of things and separated the Quran from the tradition of Arabic poetry. Islam. Hazrat Jibreel as-Salam is often referred to as Ruh al-Muqaddas, which is why God spoke to his servants. This was not a beautiful or charming angel, but a being that could conquer, and it was impossible to create. He placed his blessed head in the lap of his beloved wife and said, "Blow the blanket." Hazrat Qadi consoled him, saying, "You are kind to your relatives, you help the helpless and poor people, you are trying hard to restore those best qualities which your people have lost, you treat guests well and help the people in distress. It is not possible that any evil has overpowered you." Hazrat Qadi then advised him to come to Baraka bin Nawfal, a Christian and scholar of heavenly sciences. Baraka was convinced that an angel sent by the God of Hazrat Moses had come to Hazrat Muhammad and that he would be the first Arab prophet. He made it clear that if he remained a believer till his death, then he would believe, but he died before that. Finally, Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was convinced, and he began inviting the Quraysh to Allah. The Bible states that God revealed the Torah to Hazrat Moses at Mount Sinai. In contrast, Allah's book, the Quran, was revealed to Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam over a period of 23 years. This was a difficult and troublesome task. Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would become tired and his body would sweat. It was only natural for Hazrat Muhammad to feel a heavy responsibility. Not only were you becoming the medium of a new political name for your people, but you were also receiving continuous guidance from God. We would not attempt to create another religion. We know more about Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and from this, we get an idea about the various ways in which his thinking can be decided in practical ways. Islam is a just and fair way taught. Muslims had a duty to establish money musharas, where the poor and the needy were also treated well. Misbehavior is unacceptable. The moral message of the Quran is clear. Wealth accumulation for one's own benefit is wrong, and the wealth of the mushaka should be distributed among the rich and the poor in a proportional manner. Partition, Salat, and Qadr among the 5 basic pillars of Islam. Rasulullah initiated a creation that can make us socialists in the name of worship of God, just like the Hebrew prophets. The Quran equates religious thoughts with useless ones. The Christian principles of Taslim and Tasli also fall in this category, and it is not surprising that Muslims have such arrogant thoughts. The Jews took God as their moral standard. Jews and Christians had no connection with their holy master. Muslims adopted the historical Vedic approach in a direct way. The Quran emphasizes the use of reason for the interpretation of the prophets or signs of God, which is a key difference. Muslims had to look at the world with more strength and attention instead of suppressing their power of arbitration. This attitude fostered remarkable advancements in physical science, paving the way for a robust tradition. Unlike Christianity, Islam did not face any threats to its core beliefs. Earl Maghrib found the Quran a very difficult book. Translating it is very difficult. Translating the Arabic text is a formidable task. Muslims often say that when they read the translation of the Quran in any other text, they feel as if they are reading some other book because the beauty and power of the Arabic text is missing. Muslims claim that they only feel the spiritual effect when they read the Quran correctly. Recitation of the Quran is a spiritual breakthrough. The Ayat Surat Nigar vividly captures the astonishment of the Arabs when they first encountered the Quran. Many embraced it immediately upon hearing it. They were convinced that only God could have translated this beautiful and famous Quran. He is the one who, Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, opposite Harat Marban, people became Muslims upon hearing the verses of the finished Quran. During the first year of prophethood, Rasulullah converted many people of the new generation to Islam who were victims of the Riba and were troubled in the capitalist environment of Mecca. Many people from the humblest class also embraced Islam, including slave women, men, and poor tribesmen. It was widely anticipated that Mecca would soon embrace the religion of Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu wasallam. The concept of the matchless status of God is the foundation of the morals presented by the Quran. Breaking relations with the Medes or seeking wishes from inferior gods was shirk, a sin in Islam. The Quran also condemns idol worship in the same way as it was said in the Holy Sahih of the Jews. The ineffectiveness of these people among the Muslims is glaring. The worship of God was evident when Mutlaqada conveyed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "I am a hidden place." Why should I not go? I destroyed the world. Muslims are of the nature. This aspect of al-Hayat is clearly evident when contemplating and thinking over the signs and verses of the Quran that have appeared on the world. Islam clearly states that one should have taqwa on the name of God, Hari and Nari, as the two ancient scholars knew. The Quran describes 999 attributes of God, and Muslims believe that God is eternal. Sufis believe that God is one and that all the miracles of man's life are miracles. Muslims have a different view about God, according to which the history of God got increasingly complex with the passage of time. Believers consider this to be fundamental. However, during the 17th and 18th centuries, a new attitude emerged among al-Maghrib, asserting that the concept of God found refuge in science. Muslims conceive of God in the form of science. Worship of Allah is also still considered worthy of hatred. During the era of enlightened thinking, most philosophies believe in the oneness of God. We have bright thoughts, we believe in God, but we cannot reject Him. New humans cannot tolerate emptiness. They will fill the void created by science in the field of love with some other new man. The God of fundamentalism is static. To search for God, we must study the history of God deeply. Naren, this was our last video. We hope you enjoyed this video of RR. If you liked it, like it and share it with your loved ones and friends. Share your ideas for other topics in the comments. You can also ask us questions in the comments, but be sure to subscribe to our channel and press the bell button to receive notifications of our upcoming Meet videos. See you in the next video. Until then, God bless.